Today's presentation is a pretty important one, and a lot of people that have seen this presentation that I've given this talk to have actually gone on to be extremely successful attorneys and have said that this particular talk has changed their careers. And it may do the same for you, and I hope it does. I hope at a minimum that you listen to the presentation very closely. And let me just fix something here quickly and understand the things that it's about and really absorb it, because there's so many lessons in here. There are lessons from attorneys from big firms, from small firms, from wherever you are. And it's those unwritten rules here that many attorneys just never fix this here, understand. With that, I'll get started. And the presentation is called 7 Steps Attorneys with 5+ years of experience need to save their careers. So I'm going to talk to you today about why business is important for attorneys and the reasons that it's important, and why, let's fix this here, and why nothing really is more important than the amount of business that you're able to generate. It actually is something that in many aspects is more important than the quality of your work. I hate to say that, but it's true. I'm going to talk to you about things why business is important. And I'm also going to talk to you about what to do if you don't have any business and the steps you need to take. And there are lots of steps and there are lots of things you need to do. But even as a first-year attorney or even as a law student, it's important to understand these rules and how things are operating in the background if you're an attorney, and what you need to do in order to make sure that you position yourself in your career properly. If you don't have any business, there's several choices that you'll face. The first is you can go in-house. The second is you can get more business or get business. The third is you can find a healthy law firm that doesn't require you to have business, which is what a lot of people try to do. And this is part of my career, is helping people do that. The other one is to find an advocate inside the law firm with a lot of business that will give you business. The other is to wait for a better economic environment, which I can talk about as well. And the 6th is to downgrade the quality of the firm you're working at, where business is not important and where you can get work. And the 7th is to stop practicing law completely. As attorneys get more senior, they always look at their options and they will choose one of these. And the most popular one I think that people choose is to initially maybe find another law firm that's healthy, or to go in-house. And then others will downgrade the quality of the law firm, and others will try to get close to other attorneys inside their law firms with business. But the most common is typically to probably go in-house or find a law firm that does have the work. So these 7 choices are really among the most important choices that attorneys in their career face. And all of them at some point will face these. And if you have business, you're not facing it. But what I try to do in my career and what I do on a daily basis is related to helping attorneys make choices. And a lot of the people I talk to, I spend my days talking to partners and associates and others. And when I talk to partners, a substantial number of them don't have any business and are looking for other options. And the ones that do have business always do have a lot of options. And as a preliminary matter, I just want to give you guys and everybody here an idea of how important business is in a law firm, because people don't really think about this, and they don't understand many times how important it is and how, why it matters so much. So one of the stories that I've told in this presentation for a while is about an attorney that I've known who's been practicing at least 20 years, maybe even more than that now. And since he was about 6 or 7 years out of law school, he's always had, I would say, between $1 and $3 million in business. Sometimes it's a little bit more, but generally that's around the number that he comes in. And he has a lot of problems. He's got major substance abuse problems. He gets drunk and acts crazy. I've seen it with people that are inappropriate. He makes enemies with law firms. He's got a bad reputation in a lot of respects. He's got so many law firms on his resume that instead of listing all the law firms and the employment dates, he just has a section where he lists his current employer, and then he'll say from the year, I don't know, whatever, the year he got out of law school until the present, he's been an associate at partners in various law firms, including, and that's what it says. But incredibly, no one cares about any of this apparently because he keeps getting jobs and he keeps getting jobs in one top law firm after another. Now, there's certain law firms that certainly won't have anything to do with him are very careful about who they hire, but for the most part, law firms want his business. And so he does get into good law firms. His reputation in the legal community, the fact that he starts his drinking usually in the morning before noon, and none of the stuff matters. No one cares. It's just all these things that an associate thinks you need to behave and act a certain way don't matter because he has business and people know about his behaviors and he just keeps getting away with it. And it's been going on for decades. And he's good with people. There's a lot of very positive things. He's an extremely smart person. He's got good business insights. He sticks up for his clients. He does a lot of things very well. But what I'm telling you is that you can be a complete wreck. And if you have business, law firms will take you seriously because they need it. A law firm cannot survive without business. And it's what keeps the lights on. It's what gives associates jobs. It's what gives partners without business jobs. It's what gives secretaries. It's what keeps everybody employed are people that are bringing in business and work. And it's just extremely important. And the idea that someone can be a complete train wreck, hardly keeping it together, not making it into work. This guy, I could tell you stories because it's actually pretty funny, but I remember one time he missed a hearing because he'd fallen asleep in his garage after he drove home drunk one night and was sleeping in his garage when he woke up and got a call from an associate about the fact he was missing a hearing. So this is the kind of stuff that, is crazy. Another time, the guy took a bunch of pain pills to deal with a hangover when he was at work. And it made him groggy that he couldn't get out of his chair, and his wife had to come and wheel him down to the escalator on his chair. This is true. These are true stories. It's actually very funny. The point is, like, if you're an attorney with business, like, you can get away with a lot, and law firms need you. And that's the power dynamic here is such that the attorneys with business, you should never aspire to this kind of behavior, by the way, because he's obviously very unhappy and there's a lot of problems and he's gotten cancer and all sorts. But the problem is, like, you have to realize how important business is. Let me tell you another quick story. I have partners that I get called all the time from major law firms, Skadden, Gibson Dunn, not so much Gibson Dunn, but whatever the firm, just lots of major firms. And if one of these partners calls me, and you would think that, and these firms they're the very top of the legal profession, the best they are. If one of these firms wants to move firms, the first question these firms will ask is, how much business do they have? Most of the time, they don't care. They don't care that the person may have gone through the ranks and risen to these great heights of these firms that are impossible. You have to be incredibly talented to become a partner there. A lot of times the firms don't care. They want to know how much business the firm has. And if the answer is zero, the conversation almost always stops. It doesn't matter. I've seen partners from all these major firms that if a firm decides that they don't want to have them around anymore, and sometimes they do, if the firm partner doesn't have any business, then the law firm can basically tell them to leave whenever they want. And they do. They don't all do that. Many of the firms, there's some very nice firms out there. And actually, I would say some of these firms like Sidley and Austin can actually be very nice to its partners. And so can Jones Day and Sherman and Sterling, Skadden. These are not bad places, but the point is they're businesses and they can decide at any time to let someone go. And if they don't have any business, and it's really no skin off the firm's back many times. The firm just doesn't care about if the person doesn't have any business. Many times the partner without any business is just no matter how great their legal skills are, is always going to be in danger of losing their job. It just doesn't matter. Law firms restructure, they change their compensation mechanism, older partners come in. I consult with a lot of law firms, and one of the things that's always happening in law firms is there's always younger talent rising that has a lot of business, and then older people that are losing business and not as hungry anymore and don't have as much business. And those older people without business are always being pushed out as the younger people come in and want to make more money. And the ones without any business, they try to get rid of completely so they can make more money. That's just how it works. That's how the business works. And every law firm you can look at is almost like a little management. I don't know how to put it, but a little a little economic ecosystem. And that economic ecosystem functions to drive as much efficiency and so forth to the top as it can. And business is needed in order to do that. So when these partners lose their jobs, what happens is they always try like crazy to get jobs in another firm. And I place tons of people like that, and I can place partners from major firms without any business. But for most partners with business, there's a very cold reception. There's not a lot of interest in them. Just the ability to do good work is not welcome. In major markets that are very sophisticated, like New York and so forth, it's even worse. A major market like New York City, they can afford to be very discriminating. In the smaller markets, not as much. People want people with business, and law firms and partners all that don't have business and partners that do have business know this. I've seen federal judges give up lifetime appointments in judiciary and try to retire from being a judge and return to law firms. And even they aren't welcome without business. It's just absolutely crazy. I've seen partners that have been partners in major law firms in major cities with no business making. When I say 500,000, that's actually low. I've seen partners with no business making $1.5 million or $2 million a year. Actually, more than that. I've seen them making over 3 in some cases. But I've seen them, they'll be banging down my door trying to get a job paying 175,000 or even less. Could be in the middle of Texas or in Midland, Texas, working for an oil company, or in the swamps of Louisiana. They want these jobs because they feel like they're safer, and they're treated in a lot of cases in their firms, even if they're making a lot of money, they feel like they're treated like second-class citizens without any business. So if you don't have any business inside a law firm, it's just very dangerous. When an attorney with a few $1 million in business wants to change firms, there's really not a lot of discussion. There is a lot of discussion, but there's things that what they discuss is, it's not, once they get over the business hump, there's really not a lot more. It's really more about like how much money the partner's going to keep. They'll talk about things like conflicts, and they'll talk about things like the culture and all these things. But it's really more, to some extent, it's the partner with the business is interviewing the firm. It really, there's a power dynamic, and the more business there is, it's almost like the more that exists. Now, the very prestigious firms do have a lot of, always have the power. I would say they really don't give that away. But for the most part, the partner is the one that's in charge at almost all firms. Not the most prestigious firms, but most of the firms, the partners are driving the conversation. And the discussion really is around how much work he's going to get to keep, how much of his business and revenue he's going to get to keep. So if the partner, say, has $3 million in business, one law firm may let him keep 30% of that work, $30 million or $1 million. Another may let him keep half of that, 500,000. It just depends. But different law firms will allow partners to keep different amounts of money. And that's just really what the discussions tend to be about. And the point you need to understand is that when a partner's working for a law firm, the main discussion is going to be how much money that partner's going to get to keep. And it's just such a fundamental issue, and that's what the discussions are about. So it's just something you need to understand. So let me give you a little bit of discussion, a little bit of illustration about how business kind of matters for senior associates and so forth in a firm. So a lot of firms may have this is just an example. There's so many different law firm compensation models for partners, but just imagine the firm's compensation model is you get 30% of the revenue of the things that you work on and 15% of your business. So if you get, and then you get 15% of what others do. So if you have $1 million in business and you do all your own work, you'll make $300,000. So if you work on all your own clients. If you do none of your own work and you give all your work to other people, you'll make $150,000. And that's just the model. And that's how that works someplace. So that's very simplistic, but I hope you can understand from this example that partners always want to do their own work. It's in their interest to do their own work because they make more money when they do it. And if they give it to other people and the law firm has to pay other people to do it, then they don't make as much money. And the other thing that goes on is partners need to present bills in a way that makes clients happy. So one of the reasons that junior associates and so forth are so popular in law firms, and they love it, the 1 to 5 year associate, is because they're cheaper. And they'll work hard, they won't complain most of the time because they want to advance. and they can charge them out at lower rates, and they're not taking a percentage of the partner, the business, and so forth, the firm's profits, and it will keep the bills down. It looks much better to have an associate billing 100 hours on something than to have a partner doing it at a higher billing rate. That's just how it works. The problem is, as associates become much more senior, their billing rates will become much closer to what partners charge per hour. And this just doesn't look good to the client and partner. So the partner would rather be billed out at higher rates themselves. So the client would prefer to have the partner doing the work and not a high paid associate, because the partner presumably understands the client better, is a better attorney, and so forth. And the partner has the relationship with the law firm. So that's just the way that law firms to do it. The other problem with senior associates and of counsel attorneys is very straightforward. Just as young associates are judged by the number of hours they bill, how much generate revenue that they're generating more, than their salary, and how good they look on paper. Partners are judged just by how much business they have. You can get into a law firm when you're young based on your qualifications, but the only way to really stay there is to have a lot of business. And the more business you have and the more of your own work you do, the more money you'll make. Business really is what it's all about. And it really, nothing is more important for an attorney. And the reason, for this presentation, so you can, and then I want you to understand the big point here, is as your billing rate as you become more senior, the law firm raises your billing rate every year. Your billing rate as a first-year attorney may be half of what it's going to be as a sixth-year attorney or seventh-year attorney. And as that billing rate increases, you're becoming much closer to the partners, and the client would prefer to have a partner doing the work, as well as the partner would prefer in most cases to do the work because they will make more money that way. And so that's just very straightforward, I hope. And I hope all that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so these are the choices that you face if you're a partner or senior associate with little or no business. And you may feel your job is in danger. It often isn't. I would just want to be clear. I know lots of partners in major law firms with no business that make very good incomes that don't have business, but we'll talk a little bit about that in the future. But these are generally, in most law firms, the choices that you have. The first choice you have is to go in-house. And this is something that all attorneys start talking about as something that they want to do pretty soon, just almost as soon as they step in the door in many major law firms. But in reality, while it's romanticized as a great thing for attorneys to do and so forth, a lot of times the reasons that attorneys do it is because they're having a lot of difficulty playing the law firm game, and they know their jobs are in danger. So the idea becomes in many law firms that everyone wants to go in-house and so forth. They don't want the billable hours. They want this and that. But really what they're saying is they're not able to play the law firm game. And law firm is a game. You played a lot of games to become an attorney. Getting good grades in college and working hard so you can go to a good law school is a game. Getting into the best law school you can go to is a game. Doing well in law school so you can get a job is a game. Choosing where to work is a game. All this stuff is a game. And so you're just playing a new game when you get into a law firm. And you have to decide if you're the best person, to play that game. And the people that honestly that go in-house most of the time, they tend to be of a variety of different types of people. And I'm not saying that any of this is negative, but a lot of them are women that want to start a family or spend more time with their children, which is perfectly understandable. They're people that are sick of the long hours. Again, perfectly understandable. They're attorneys without business and no future at their law firm that may have been working on institutional clients. No one's ever taught them how to get business. They've always been treated as a tool in the machine. Again, wanting to leave is perfectly understandable. All these people have reasons for wanting to leave and go in-house. But what in-house means is it really means you have to have a very high level commitment. What working in a law firm means to practice law at a high level. And there's nothing wrong with any of these reasons. But you have to ask yourself why you're not playing the game. Because in some cases, playing the game in New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago in a major firm is much different than playing in a smaller firm or playing in a smaller market. And just because you can't play the game and just because you can't play a game in the Olympics doesn't mean that you should stop playing. Lots of people play in smaller markets and do very well. It doesn't or don't have to play in an Olympic team. This is the insanity of people giving up and so forth because they don't like competing in these Olympic level firms is crazy. But anyway, so many people can have a much better life working in-house than they can working in a law firm. And the other thing is, when you go in-house, I mean, some of these in-house jobs are absolutely exceptional. They're better than working in a law firm. I've seen many attorneys go to work at hedge funds and make millions and millions of dollars. I've seen people that became general counsels of major corporations and made tens of millions of dollars. And I've seen people go into in-house jobs and go back to law firms after having incredibly successful careers there. But it's rare. It's not just as becoming a partner in a major law firm is very difficult and rare. It's also rare for people to have major success going in-house. More than often than not, and I don't want to get too far into this right now, but when you go in-house, there's major problems. One of the major problems is in-house companies change management and leadership all the time. And when they do, they typically want to bring in new legal departments that support their way of thinking. And legal departments are something that typically will go through a lot of changes. The people in the legal department are expected to support the management. They don't always, they're a cost center. They're not a profit center like in a law firm. So there's all sorts of problems. And I've read about it, but the resumes that I see typically of people that go in-house, and again, I don't want to be alarmist but most of them are someone that was working in a major firm. They go in-house, and then all of a sudden there's 1 year here, 2 years here, 6 months here, 2 years here, like all these different in-house jobs with periods of unemployment and so forth. And they can't go back to a law firm. And it's not in a law firm where there's just law firms on every corner. If you want to work inside of a legal department, inside of a company, there's not as many of them. So it's just a very difficult thing for many people. But I talk to attorneys, and that's not to say that it's always bad, because it's not. But a lot of times it is. One of the attorneys that was my mentor went in-house. He's a famous attorney, a very famous attorney, went in-house, got fired, now is being sued for malpractice and all this stuff because he had a relationship problem, not because he did anything wrong, with someone that worked there. And this is a famous attorney, very well-known attorney. And the last time I spoke to him in the afternoon, he was drunk. So I just don't even, it can hurt you. It can really do a lot of damage to some people, but it's not always the case. The point is, though, I talk to lots of attorneys that want to go in-house, even attorneys that have a lot of business. I was working not too long ago with a fifth-year attorney, and he had over $1 million in business. He brought in a couple major Las Vegas casinos as clients. I don't even know how he did it, but he did. And he wanted to go in-house for a much easier job. It's just because he was with a major firm and it was romanticized. And I asked him, I said, why would you possibly want to do that? And it just didn't make any sense to me why he would want to have me find him an in-house job when he had all this business and he was in control of his career. He was in a position where he wasn't really getting orders from partners and so forth to do certain things anymore. He was giving work out to other associates. So I told him what I'm going to tell you right now. And I want you to understand this. And I don't think in-house is horrible for everyone, but for the most part, going in-house can be like going to medical school and getting a job with one of the best hospitals in the country as a brain surgeon, if you get a job in a law firm, and then deciding to give it up to become a nurse at a small clinic. And the reason for that statement is when you're in-house, you don't have any pressure to generate any business. You're not going to be doing the most sophisticated legal work. Most of the time, law firms are going to be hired by the company, are going to be doing the most sophisticated work. You're not going to be surrounded by the best attorneys. You're surrounded by people in the legal department that also are there because they didn't like the law firm environment. And the work is just not going to be as high level or demanding. It's just not what it is. It's just not the same thing. And the other thing that I don't like to see, and I see this all the time, I get these resumes that come across my desk, and it's not daily, quite a bit, from people that are major attorneys in legal departments. It could be Apple, Google, General Motors, like companies that are household names. And I might get the desk of someone that's one of the top people in the legal department. It could be the number 2 peer person or even the number 1 person. And when I first started seeing this, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, I always thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, I'm dealing with the number 2 person from General Motors. I can't believe it. This is amazing. This is a great candidate. I'm so excited. And but the law firms just wouldn't be interested in it. no one would care. They would say the person's been in the house for 3 years. Why would we be interested in them? Or they don't have any business, or there's just, if someone goes in house, I mean, their perception is they've given up on what being in a law firm is about. And that's the problem. And law firms, by the way, are incredibly competitive. I remember earlier in my legal career, or legal placement career, I sent a partner that had $4 million in business to Gibson Dunn, which is a great firm, but they were from a smaller firm. And Gibson Dunn called me up and said, "What's this billing rate?" And I said it was $785 an hour, which I thought was pretty good. And the firm acted like I was like, what was I thinking? And got off the phone because the billing rate wasn't high enough. And this was a long time ago. So right now it'd probably be like saying the billing rate was $1,100 an hour. I don't know. But the point is, practicing law is very serious, and it's in a law firm. And if you step off the track, the fast track, it's going to be very difficult to ever get back on. And it does happen. I've seen patent attorneys and real estate attorneys and so forth go in house and come back. But going in house is something you need to think about very carefully. And if you don't have any business, it may be a good option. But it's just, I just, want you to understand this is a decision a lot of people make. It's not always the best one. And that's my point here today, is you just need to be very careful about this decision, because it's not always the best decision for you. And there's a lot of drawbacks that people don't talk about. When I bring this stuff up to people that tell me they're going in-house, they just assume I'm biased because I'm trying to place them in a law firm. And is that a bias? No, it's not a bias. It's just from what I've seen. And I actually have a lot of respect for the business model of law firms. And that's why I believe that the most logical thing to do if you don't have any business and you're senior is to get more business. This is the most logical action or get business to begin with that anyone can take. If you're going to lose your job eventually, or you're going to lose your job without business, why don't you learn how to get business and get business? That to me seems just completely logical. All these other things, going in-house, finding mentors, all this stuff is you can do, but the most logical thing would be to get business, because that's really all you need to do. Once you have business, you're going to be in control of your career. You could decide you want to take 5 OxyContin and have your wife come pick you up at the office and roll you out of the elevator in front of everybody because you can't move because you took the OxyContin because you're too hungover to work without it. This is how much important business is, and get away with it. You hopefully will never get to that point. But if you have business, like, you're just in control. You can move law firm when you want to. You're going to be really the one controlling conversations with law firms, and you'll have your own business. A law degree and a bar license really is a license to operate your own business. People don't understand this. It's a very difficult license. It's before the age of Uber and stuff. A taxi cab medallion in New York City or a big city used to be worth a lot of money because you were one of a few people that had a license to do this. And that's what passing the bar exam is. It gives you the right to operate a business. And so you want to have a business, and your business in a law firm, by the way, is you bring in the work and they help you service it, and they provide a service for you in exchange for a percentage of all your billable work. And when you have your own business, you're servicing your clients, you're doling out work to other partners and associates. So get your own business. It's the whole point, by the way, an attorney. It's just what it is. You're supposed to learn your craft. You apprentice for other people. You apprentice at the best people you can. So you work at the best law firm you can. You learn a practice area. You get good at it. And then clients used to have to come to you. Attorneys didn't even used to be allowed to advertise, for God's sake. But you have to learn how to go get clients. This is what you need to do. And you don't need to be like outgoing. You don't need to be like super suave and handsome, or anybody can get business. It doesn't matter who you are. There's attorneys with business that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You just have to make this something you want. If a person does not have any business, it says a lot. I talk to partners all day that don't have business. And I talk to senior associates that don't have business. And I ask them if they have any business. And they all say something similar to, we only work with institutional clients and so forth. And fine, that's true. But you know what? Somebody brought in those institutional clients at some point, and people do it all the time. I know attorneys that were brought in many major corporations when they were in their 30s. It's just, you can bring in bigger clients. The assumption is that if you're really good, and if you figure out the business of practicing law, which is having a specialty, being good with people, getting out there, lots of dinners and networking and whatever you can do, then you'll get business. And I'm going to be frank with you. And I don't like bragging on these, because if I talk about myself, it makes me look like bragging, and then you won't like me and take my advice. But the point is, everyone always has to be careful bragging around clients, by the way. So I'm just trying to teach you some client skills. You can certainly brag about your legal abilities. But when I was a second year associate, I had plenty of business. I had much more business than my salary. And the reason I had business is because I've always taken stuff seriously. Even when I was in elementary school, I took things seriously. I take whatever I do very seriously, and people around me know it. The first clients I got clients from people contacting me that I knew in high school that had businesses. I had people contact me from previous law firms even that I worked at, even offering me business, if you can believe it, that they couldn't take. I had people, if you take stuff seriously and you're really serious about it and they know you're ethical, people are going to always want to give you business. I'm hosting this webinar. I take recruiting seriously. I take everything I do seriously. And I do the best I can, and I don't give up on people. I don't give up clients. And so if you come across as that type of person, and whatever you do, then clients are going to not want to work with you. Who wouldn't want to work with someone that's going to take it seriously and be their advocate? Very few people do that. Most people are just like going with the flow, and they're following other people, and they don't really get behind their clients and people. And so they don't get business. And I'm not disappointed, is not to tell you that I'm special or anything, but I'm trying to tell you what good attorneys do. What kind of attorney would you want representing you? Would you want someone like in your law firm who's a follower and talks negatively about others and cuts corners and doesn't work hard? Or would you want someone that you were like the most important thing in the world to them? Because I'm talking to you right now, and this is the most important thing in the world to me, is making sure you understand this. Would you want a client that a partner representing you that did that, or an attorney representing you that did that? If someone is hardworking and driven, gets out there socially to meet people, has a work ethic and so forth, then he or she's going to get business. People will always give work to people that they believe are going to take their case and their work incredibly seriously. You need to get out there and write about it, talk about it, and be enthusiastic about it. This is how attorneys get business. I was hiring an attorney for something not too long ago. I remember a couple of years ago. And one of the attorneys that I hired, that I was trying to talk to, thought they were so important that they literally would not, they had like a junior partner or someone talking to me, and the partner that I was trying to hire wouldn't talk to me because they were just too important. So I didn't hire that attorney, and it ended up being a fairly large transaction. So the point is, that you have to be hungry, and you have to want to get business, and people need to believe in you. I know one of the things I thought that was really interesting when I started out at my first firm, which was Quinn Emanuel, John Quinn used to meet with clients, and they would say something like, "Why should I hire you?" And he would say, "Because if you hire me, I will eat, drink, and sleep this case and do whatever I can and not give up." And that's true. That he actually meant that. And that's the kind of attorney most people want representing them. They don't want someone who's wants to go talk about where they went to law school and their clerkship or whatever. They want someone who's invested in that. When I started at Quinn, the firm had so much work, it was unbelievable. I had, something like, I was a lead associate as a second-year attorney on over 30 cases. I was dangerous. I had my office, like double-stacked file cabinets that could have fallen and killed me. They just had some very good business generators. But this firm didn't need business generators. They needed soldiers. And so there's a difference. So most law firms, soldiers doing the work, but there are just not a lot of law firms like that. And because it had so much work, the way people would make partner there was to work a lot of hours. And for me, that wasn't what I saw as my skill would be to offer my work. I thought my skill would be to try to bring in business. I felt like that was a better long-term strategic choice. You need to think strategically about your career. Are you better off having this weakness and being exposed for not having any business? Because I knew that if I stayed at that firm back then, it's a different firm now, but if I stayed at that firm, that the long-term survival prospects for me weren't going to be good, because I wouldn't necessarily be in a position to stand out by generating a lot of business. And this way I was. And it's really the most important thing. And by the way, at the firm, lots of people there did make partner and so forth, and working 3,000 hours a year, but the majority of them now are gone. I mean, they never generated any clients. And then as the management changed and the firm grew, that didn't help them. And so lots of firms will say, you don't need any business. And they'll say, if they do say that, you should run for your life, because you need business at every firm. There's no firm where you don't need business. If you don't have business, the only thing you're doing is giving up control of your career and life to someone else. and anything can happen to you. The firm can go out of business, the management can change, all sorts of things can happen. And if you don't have business, you're going to really suffer from it. You're going to have all sorts of problems. And the only thing that's going to happen if you don't have any business is you're going to be at the mercy of others. And I'm sorry, but going in-house is basically, you're also dependent on them for business too. You need to get business. This is the whole point of being an attorney. And so many people don't understand. That's the only thing you need to do. There's so many forces around you that are trying to convince you not to get business, which are often the firm you're working at, because they need soldiers. They don't need business generators. They need soldiers. Even though it may seem counterproductive for them not to want you to get business, they can always recruit people that have business to come over there, but they need to get work done. In-house companies need soldiers to do the work. They don't need people to bring in business and so forth. As I said, most of the partners that I knew when I was at Quinn that were partners without work are no longer there. Most of them went to smaller firms where they're trying to make a living with no business. And many of them worked for 3,000 hours a year. That's on the high end. Honestly, many of them did work that many hours for years with no business. When management changed, then, the compensation changed. And that's just how it works at every firm. And that's how firms survive. It's just how the legal industry works. It's not they're bad people over there. They're just following the way that every firm works. And firms are going to allow you to kill yourself and do as much work as you can for as long as it suits them. You could get a job at Cravath out of law school, and you could be the best person in your practice area that ever existed. But they'll allow you to work there for 7 or 8 years, but then they're going to say, hey, time's up and you're going to have to leave. And they'll let you work there. If you don't have business, you're in real it's a real problem. And I hate that. If I was on this call right now and I was like you and I was a senior attorney, I would be angry. If I was a junior attorney, I would be angry. Most people don't want to hear this stuff. Most people tune it out because it's very difficult. It's the stuff I'm telling you right now it's hard to hear. When people tell me my weaknesses, it's hard to hear just because it makes me not feel secure and makes me need to work harder and stuff. And this is what it's about. And this is what coaching's about. It's about learning this stuff. And it's hard. It's not easy to learn. I received phone calls from partners at major AmLaw 100 law firms making $120,000 a year, less than junior associates that are hired right out of law school. And it's astonishing. And the law firms pay them this because they can. The person has no other option. So they just keep chipping away at their compensation year after year and paying them less and less. And the person doesn't leave. And I remember when I started my career, I couldn't believe it. I was talking to a guy that was a partner at a major, I don't know how big the firm was, probably like one of the 15 largest firms in the country. And I went over to his house to drop off some documents or get some documents or something. And of course, replacing him. And the grass was all overgrown, the paint was chipping, and the guy didn't even have money to keep up his house. And it's just, this is what happens with dead weight if you don't have any business. I once saw a major law firm. There was a partner early in my career, the real estate market was horrible. I don't remember when it was, like 2000, maybe, or 2000, maybe 2000. I don't remember the year. Interest rates were higher and there wasn't a lot of real estate work. And I saw a major law firm in Los Angeles offer a real estate partner that didn't have a job, $60,000 a year. And even back then, that was extremely low. That was, I don't remember what the associate salaries were, but it was much less than associate salaries. And I couldn't believe it. I was astonished. I was like, why would they do this? And they were just very arrogant about it. They said, we're the only firm with any work and we can pay them whatever we want. And I was like, wow. So that was one of the first things that taught me how important business is. If you don't have any business, you don't have any power. Even if many law firms will, and this is another kind of secret of the legal profession, many law firms will, if you don't have any business, some of them will make you like counsel or something. But if you don't bring any business as counsel, they'll keep reducing your compensation year after year. So you may start out at a really high number, I don't know, $500,000-$600,000 a year, but maybe the next year they'll pay you $475,000, and then maybe the next they'll just keep reducing your salaries because they know you don't have any power and you can't move firms and you can't reliably forecast your future compensation. You can be pushed around. This is serious stuff. This is just how the legal profession works if you don't have any business. So logically, why wouldn't you get business? It doesn't seem to make any sense. So when I was like a third-year associate and I was at Dewey Ballantine, there was a guy in an office next to me. He was making a very good living. He was at least $200,000 a year. But he was living in a studio apartment with his wife across the street from the office. And his wife used to bring in these noodles that you boil in a package and probably buy for 20 cents at the grocery store. I don't know, these ramen or whatever they're called, and heat up water and eat him, make him the stuff for lunch and stuff when he was working during the week and the weekends. And it's just very nice of her. But one day I was like, why? Because I stopped by his office and chat with him. I'm like, why do you live in this little apartment and eating this lunch for 20 cents? And he'd be like, I've been doing this long enough to know that I could lose my job any day and not be able to find a new one because I don't have any business. He was working for some partners at business. And the idea is that the only security you're ever going to really find is from getting business. And you need to do whatever you can to get as much business. There's nothing's more important. And I'm not going to teach you today how to get business, of course, but like anything, I believe I could teach you all sorts of techniques and things about how to get business. But the most important thing is to want business. Once you want business or want something, you find opportunities to get it. If you want to meet someone, you find ways to meet them, and then you meet them. If you want anything, you need to want it. And hopefully today I've given you some reasons to want to get business, which is if you get nothing out of this, it's the most important thing. But if you really want to be business, you should want to think about it this way. Do you want to be an attorney? Because if you want to be an attorney, the only way to have security in your career is to have business. Otherwise, you're going to be at the mercy of other people telling you when you can be an attorney, when you cannot. And if you really want to be an attorney, you should be the best attorney you can be. And the only way to be an attorney, the best attorney you can be, is to have work. And it's just true. And the people that want something the most are the ones that get it. Presumably, at some point, you wanted to be an attorney and go to law school, and then you wanted to get a job out of law school, and you wanted to do well in college, or all these things are things that you wanted in the past. And there's probably lots of other things you wanted, whether it was your significant other or the friends you have or the other accomplishments you have or cars you bought or people that you've met. And all this is true. If you want something, you get it. I thought about this before, and it's interesting. So I've taught classes before to attorneys, not in a while, I don't know how many years it's been, but about how to get business. And the thing is that classes are good classes. I charge a few $1,000s for them, and the people that took them went on to get business. Not all of them, most of them got business in a fairly short order. When I taught about things about how to network, how to be seen as a giver and not a taker, how to be found when people are looking for you. And these are all things, by the way, that you should be doing. You should learn to network. You should learn to give advice for free and to be seen as someone that's helping. And you should learn to be found for what you want to be found. The reason that these people got business wasn't really due to me, by the way. It had nothing to do with me. The reason these people got business, and a lot of them, is they're the ones that were interested in getting business. They wanted to get business. And so they were willing to pay for a course, and they thought about it. But people are pre-selected. Anybody that wants to take a course to get business, and I'm not selling a course on this webinar, by the way, to get business, because this is, you can read other things I've written. But the point is, people that really want something, they get it. So you need to just get yourself fired up you need to have goals where you're reminding yourself you want to get business and so forth. The people that, are willing to pay for a course and study all these things, networking, being a giver, how to be found, read books and so forth, are the ones that get business. It's as simple as that. One of the things that's interesting is people are so competitive about wanting to go to great schools. They want to get into all these good schools, and they want to get into these good law schools. And why do you think people from those schools are so successful? I think there's a couple reasons that the schools help make them successful, meaning the people that they spend their time around with and the goals. But the thing that makes them most successful is most of them were already destined to be very successful before they even got into the schools and went there. People like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates are both Harvard dropouts. They were on such a fast upward trajectory that the school had more to gain probably from them than they had to gain from going there. They dropped out because they were constrained, but they were like that before they even went there. They were the kind of people that were going to do very well. And so it's just like that with business. Like, you have to really want something and be on a fast upward trajectory. And it's not successful getting business because you take a course on it. You get successful because you really want it. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll come back. I just have to grab something, and then we'll come back and do the rest of these. Thank you. Strangest thing, I was at my coffee here. Now I don't know where it is, but I could. Anyway, it's okay. All right. So let's move on. So the next one is if you don't have any business, is the option that people do is they try to find a healthy law firm. And this is actually a large portion of what I do for a living. If you don't have a lot of business, there are all over. There's lots of very healthy law firms that you can go to work in, and they have work for associates and partners without business. And it's actually very possible to find these law firms. Regardless of who the partner is, regardless of who the associate is, if I work with someone and I want to work with someone, I can always find people a job. It's not impossible. It's just not easy. And most recruiters and people in my profession don't want to do it because it's just so much work, but I'm happy to do it. And I've been doing it since the start of my career and have been very successful in it because I know that different types of people appeal to different types of people. There's plenty of people that need senior attorneys to do work and can't do it all themselves. It's just the way it is. One of my first placements when I started my career was a securities partner. He had no business, and I placed him at the predecessor firm of K&L Gates, and he had no business, and I got him a job in Seattle, where someone had left the firm to become the personal securities attorney for Bill Gates, and which is funny, and he replaced that partner in the firm, and the firm had a long-standing relationship with him, and I found that firm. And he couldn't believe it because he wasn't even from Seattle. I think he was actually living in Russia at the time. The point is, like, anybody can be placed. And I've not too long ago had a lot of luck in markets where people were doing oil fracking, where they just needed very senior people because those things in North Dakota and so forth were doing well. I've placed lots of solo practitioners in major firms, and it's not difficult if they're in the right practice area. I told this particular partner when I called him that the real estate market was exploding and doing well. And when I told him that he didn't think people would hire him because he didn't have a lot of business and so forth. And when I told him about major law firms that he could get jobs in, he didn't believe me. And he refused to hear any of it. And he was afraid to put himself out there. And I was 100%. I was speaking to literally probably the most prestigious. There's a lot of very prestigious law firms in Detroit, but one of the top ones. And they needed someone just like him. And he refused to apply because he didn't believe that not having any business and he wouldn't be able to get a job. And a few weeks later, the firm hired someone just like him for a salary of $290,000 a year, which, by the way, is very good in Detroit. It's not the greatest salary, in big markets, but it's a good salary in Detroit. So the point is, this is what I do for a living. So as much as I talk about having business, and as much as other recruiters talk about how important it is you have to have business, most people that don't, and again, I'm just not bragging, but if you're looking for a job and you work with the wrong recruiter, you're screwed, because what that means is they're not going to know how to market you to a lot of places or the right places, or they're only going to know that the demand is primarily for attorneys that have a lot of business, which is how it works. But there's always going to be work in certain practice areas. There's always going to be work in certain markets. And at some points, many law firms will have work and others won't have it. Miami's an interesting example. There's always a market for attorneys that do certain types of corporate work there, regardless of how senior they are, because there's a lot of very small law firms and so forth. So there's a lot of healthy firms all over that need people. You just need to find them. The thing to understand is at some point, some firms are busy and other firms aren't busy. So work is just moving around to different firms. And the job of a good legal placement person is to find where that work is. And it's also to understand where the markets are, what markets are active. So like patent prosecution for people with double E's and computer scientists is always pretty active in the Bay Area. And even if you want to move there from another area of the country, it's always an option. There's a lot of smaller markets that it's very difficult for them to find attorneys all the time to do patent work. And the same thing goes for most practice areas. Even like New York City is another example. And this isn't about patent, but in New York City, it's very difficult for people that are senior litigators to find jobs there. Just very difficult. But it becomes much easier when they start moving out to Long Island and various suburbs and so forth. Then there's actually a lot of demand for senior litigators there. But most people are too hung up on, I live in New York City or whatever. You have to know the markets. Over the past several months, there were a lot of openings for patent attorneys with life science backgrounds in New York City because there was, some cancer drugs under development. But historically, the openings for these attorneys have been strong in San Diego, Orange County, and also in Boston. But now that even then the market was strong in New York. So you have to be able to find healthy markets, and you have to understand how that works. And one of the things that I push our legal placement people in my company to do is to always try to get people interested in other markets. Your law school may be really important in a major market in a big firm, but in other markets it's not going to be as important. And so you have to find healthy law firms, and you have to, many cases, like the example I gave you of the fracking, getting busy in different markets, you have to know what are the busy markets. When energy prices are down, Texas can be a bad market, but Texas is actually a booming market now for other reasons. So you have to know where the work is. And many times in recessions, anytime there's an economic recession or something, work tends to also move to smaller markets. Companies, instead of sending work out to the most expensive firms, will start using law firms in smaller markets. And so the work actually many times gets busier in smaller markets because the legal work's cheaper there. So they'll send it to smaller firms. And so we've had years where in the middle of the worst recessions and the worst events, we've actually made more placements and brought in more revenue because other recruiters are trying to send people to nothing but big firms and big markets. And other recruiting firms are going out of business, and people are leaving the profession and going into other things. In some cases, going back to practicing law if they were attorneys. And it's just very simple. The work is always moving around. In bad markets, it's moving to smaller. It's just you have to know where the work is. And so that's one of the reasons I wish there was like certifications and stuff to do what I do for a living, because most people don't understand it. And this is very easy to understand as far as I'm concerned. If you're in a market where things are very slow, you need to get in markets where there's more work. But the problem with big markets too, by the way, Chicago, New York, and places like that is, and Houston and in some other markets, is that there's so many people willing to do the work in those markets that it's very difficult for you to get a job. And even in the less specialized you are, the more difficult it is. It can be very difficult in various markets during various times to get jobs. So you have to be very careful about that. I've seen certain markets like Rochester, New York, experience what I would term economic renaissance when major cities were having the opposite experience. A major market may be doing very well at certain points in time, or not doing well, and some of these smaller markets may be doing very well. So that can help. One of the things I've noticed is in recessions, corporate work can get very slow, and there often are far fewer jobs. What happens in recessions is litigation often picks up because people tend to file a lot of lawsuits to recover money that they believe that they lost when the market was better. And then law firms start relying on litigation for their profits. And then clients start feeling the bills are too high, and they start settling lawsuits. And then litigation will often slow down, become a slow practice group. It's everything kind of moves in cycles. When interest rates are low, but look like they're going to go up, real estate often has picked up steam as well, because people began refinancing properties and so forth. And that can make a difference. When economic activity on the legal market gets very active, generally begins on the coast. Typically, New York is the market that gets the busiest first, and then it can take off in months to reach the Midwest and Texas. And it just depends. The same thing for economic slowdowns as well. Economic slowdowns tend to start in New York and also to the Bay Area to some extent, and then slow down there as well. And one of the things that I've also often noticed is Washington, D.C. very rarely slows down. And I think that's just because of the fact that there's so much business activity, so much lobbying activity and government activity. So the work is all funded by the government. And that's always a good place to get a job, but it's also a very competitive market because people with the best qualifications want to work there. And it's actually very good for litigation related stuff and patent to some extent, and not as good for corporate. So the point is that only point I'm trying to make to you is that you need to understand that at various points in time, work is always moving within various markets, from large to mid-sized firms, from practice area, from city to city. And because of that, there's always going to be healthy firms out there if someone knows what they're doing that you're talking to. And very few people do, by the way. It's just very strange how the business that I'm in works. And if you're not talking to someone like me, then you need to really just think about some of these dynamics that I've given you, because these are the ones that guide my thinking, and they work. And it's also important to understand that just because you can't find work in your market doesn't mean that there's no work available. There's all sorts of people that are in small markets. They may be in, I don't know, but they may be in a small market somewhere. And they believe that there's no jobs, and they're not going to be able to get a position. And many times the smartest thing you can do is just look into a new area and look into a lot of different areas. I had an experience when I was clerking for a judge in Michigan and thinking about working in Detroit. And Detroit was at the time very slow. And so what I did is I applied to firms in Detroit, and I was getting interviews, but there just wasn't a lot of enthusiasm because they didn't have a lot of work. So they were just there was delays and all sorts of weird things happening. And then I started applying to firms in California and New York City and different places, and getting tons of interviews, and people were very eager to hire and much nicer. And so it's all about the market. So if I was basing my self-worth on how well I thought I was doing based on the places I was applying, it would have been a bad move. But it's also important just to understand, that the nature of law firms and that they're dynamic economic systems. They often start and grow because there's just a visionary leader or founder there. And these attorneys will, break off of a law firm or start their law firm because they see a way of, getting business or pleasing clients that others don't see. And all over the country, literally on a daily basis, new law firms are starting that are spinoffs of big firms. And it's almost impossible to keep up with them. There's so many of them. And what tends to happen with these firms is they often will grow very aggressively, and they'll hire all sorts of people, and so quickly that they won't even know what's going on. One law firm I actually know several law firms about this. This is when I wrote this a while ago. One law firm I know hired so aggressively that it didn't even notice that one of attorneys had never graduated from law school and passed the bar, despite the fact that the person had been there for 6 years and was up for partner. But finally noticed it when they were in the process of getting a quote for malpractice insurance for him as a partner. It's just, you can't make this stuff up, but the firm was growing that fast. And law firms that are in growth mode will hire very aggressively and very quickly. And they're often just not carefully managed. And they often believe that their growth and success is just going to happen indefinitely. They'll hire senior people without business because they're overconfident. These may be good places to get jobs in, and the best recruiters know how to find them. At the same time, it's just important to remember that there's a lot of places out there like that, and they're coming up all the time. All you need to do is do searches for new firms in different areas or spinoffs and that sort of thing, and you can find them. They're in every market, and a lot of times they do need senior people without business, and because they have a lot of work that they can't get done on their own. What tends to happen at a lot of these firms, though, is that they often will die. Many times they'll get overextended, meaning they'll overhire and won't be able to pay payroll, or they'll get, office space is too expensive, or they'll become professionally managed and then start getting all sorts of procedures. But the point is, before a law firm gets more mature, like I gave the example of Quinn earlier, where they were growing like gangbusters, the more likely it is to hire people who fit outside the box of what it's looking for. It's just they're in growth mode and they need people to do the work. And they may hire based on just qualifications and not business. And so these are the kind of firms that you need to find if you don't have any business. Recently, I was working with a very talented attorney who spent several years in a major firm. And they were now at the Department of Justice, and they were about 10 years out of law school. And they'd worked at the very top of the person had worked at the very top of their class from Stanford Law School and had a great record. And I sent them to a major firm in Washington, D.C. And the firm told me that they just wouldn't, talk to him, that they just automatically reject attorneys with no business. And this person was just on paper was just absolutely amazing. And I contacted a partner that I knew there that did a lot of hiring after this reaction from this administrator. And the administrator just said, that's our policy. The partner just said, I know, but that's our policy. There's nothing I can do. This is what happens to large firms. Like large firms will come up with like big policies and things that will many times make it very difficult for people to get in. Finding smaller firms or growing firms or spinoff firms many times will make it much easier for you to get a job. Larger firms, by the way, that when they start coming up with these policies, they start coming up with things like grade point cutoffs, even for partners. There's a famous story about a major Washington, D.C. firm that someone was coming out of being Secretary of State and wanted to go work there and of the U.S. government, and they wouldn't allow them to work there because of their grade point average. I believe the firm was Gibson, which is a cool thing if you think about it, that they have such high qualities, but are high standards. But the point is that the longer a firm's been around, the more formalities they have, and the harder it's going to be for you to get in. So the business becomes more important the more formal the firm is, and the more established the firm is. They start having multiple tiers of partnership. They start becoming harder to get jobs with. They start hiring people that aren't necessarily that look very similar, and so forth. So that makes it much harder to get jobs with these firms after a while. And it's just something to keep in mind and remember. Another option that a lot of people follow, and that I personally believe is an exceptional option as well, is to find an advocate inside of your law firm that has a lot of business. If you have an advocate with a lot of business, it can make a huge difference. And the dumbest thing that any attorney can do is, in many cases, is work for partners that don't have any business in their firm or that doesn't have any kind of clout. You should do your work with partners with a lot of business. And those should be the people that you want everyone to like you, obviously, but if you work with the most powerful partners with a lot of business, those are the people that can advocate your career and can keep you around and have the power to do that. Honestly, you should shine their shoes and walk their dog if they ask you to. Those sorts of people, I know of countless attorneys whose careers have lasted decades working for one partner. And a strong advocate with a lot of business is someone that can make you partner when you're young, and can keep you partner if you never generate any business, or can help you get business, or can even turn over their business to you. I sat next on a plane not too long ago with a partner from one of the offices of Latham, and he was an equity partner and very successful. And he started his career working for one partner, and then the partner retired when he was about 10 years in as an associate, and he gave him all of his work. And of course, the firm made him a partner, which is very, very difficult to do at a great firm like that. But the point is that these relationships are very, very important. And you can lose your job if you don't have this sort of relationship. And it's just a very, very important thing, because partners with business really are the most important person in many cases to have a relationship with. And the most important relationships you can have are with partners with business. These are the people that decision makers listen to when the law firm wants to keep them happy. These are the people that they're decision makers. And so the law firms will listen to them. Law firms don't want to upset them, because I know partners that have $20 million books of business and maybe giving the firm, or maybe making $3 million. So that means they're essentially giving, most of them make more than that. They make three, plus million, or 3 to 4. And so that means they're giving basically $17 million a year to the firm. So if the firm wants to make, if that person wants you to be a partner, they will make you a partner because that person has that kind of power. And the money that they're generating is not something that the firm wants to lose. You need to be loyal to those types of people that have business. You need to impress them, and they can make or break your career. And it's just a very important thing to remember, to get close to those people and to be indispensable to them, to pick up the phone no matter where you are, to all that sort of thing. And I'm not suggesting you become a sycophant, of course, and actually do walk their dog. But you do need to show them a lot of respect. And you should be getting in the office before them. You should leave them before them. You should never say anything negative about them. You should be completely indispensable for them and make them feel that you could never do their job. They could never do their job unless you were there. You just need to be seen as completely indispensable. And I apologize for just rubbing this point in so much, because I know I really am rubbing it in. But you need to make sure that these people feel you're 100% needed. And if you do this, you'll always be safe, and they will take you firm to firm with them. They'll do whatever they can to keep you around. And it's important to understand too that your career isn't about your ego. If you're you should be doing with a partner what you're doing with your clients. And you should be, all over them and helping them and so forth. And it's about surviving. And you should work for people with a lot of business, because not only they give you work to do, but you'll also learn how they get business, and you'll watch what they do, and you'll be able to copy what they do. Whereas if you're working for people that don't have a lot of business, you'll absorb the way they think about things. And I watch the dynamic inside of law firms all the time. And it's difficult for me too, because I deal with partners that have a lot of business that are trying to hire other partners with a lot of business. And I deal with partners that don't have a lot of business that are trying to undermine the process and protect their turf and when bringing people in. And there's just all sorts of dynamics inside of law firms. But I can tell you that the people with the business are the ones that control everything. And you need to get on their side. And that doesn't mean you treat the partners without business any differently, because you need them on your side too. And they also have a vote and they can create bad rumors and so forth, but you need them on your side. And just watch and listen how the people with business operate. And you're just going to pick up so much more than you realize. You'll learn their mannerisms and the way they work with clients. And this is just going to help you tremendously. I know very well compensated partners, meaning under the seven figures they make. They've been working for the same partners. Some of them are now in their 80s, their entire careers. And those people continually feed them business and keep them around. If I can say anything to you about what to do, and it may not be possible at certain law firms, but I know people that have gotten very close to some of the most powerful partners in law firms, and with no business, those people have made them partner. Okay, so the next thing you can do is you can wait for a healthy economic environment if you don't have any business. And one of the things is that sometimes the economy gets in very bad shape. And if you don't have any business, it may actually be very difficult to move within your market. But when the economy gets active, it can be easy to move. And when a market gets very hot, all of a sudden, it's funny, attorneys that never were marketable in the past are marketable now. I've had instances where we've contacted firms on someone's behalf and they've gotten no interest. And then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 months later, we followed up with the firms and maybe they suddenly we had one instance where I had a recruiter last week. It was funny. She placed 3 people in a similar practice area that initially the firms had rejected. And she checked back with them like 3 or 4 months later. And they said, you know what, we're actually interested in them now. So that's another thing that someone in my position does that a lot of times you don't understand and you wouldn't do yourself, is that you will contact firms after someone has rejected them and say, are you interested in them now? Are you interested in them now? And a lot of times they say yes. And so she actually made 3 placements in 1 week, which from a recruiting standpoint is very good. There's a lot of recruiting firms where that's all the placement people make in a year. And we have recruiters that do that in 1 week. But she made 3 placements in 1 week by following up with firms that initially rejected someone, which I thought was really cool. And it's just because the environment changed a little bit. And it happens in every market. If you wait long enough, things are going to change. You shouldn't just take a rejection from a law firm and go with it. You should make sure that you keep applying. It can change. There's traditional, for some practice areas like tax, not as much, but trust and estates, ERISA, have traditionally been very slow. And those have heated up recently, especially trust and estates. I've an attorney with 20 years of ERISA experience can be placeable, but a year later, it may be different. So it just depends on the legal environment. And if you wait long enough, there's always going to be a market where things are going to get busy. Bankruptcy will get busy it gets busy when the economy tanks and has problems, and other practice areas get busy in different points in time. And even if you're in-house or don't have business or didn't go to a good law school and do well, you can always get business when the market changes or get work. And then the 6th thing, and then there's one more after this, is to downgrade the quality of the law firm you work for, or even start your own practice. And this is very common. There's all sorts of firms and places anybody can get a job. Anybody can get a job for the most part, doing working for a solo practitioner or doing work for different types of firms. If you're a real estate attorney, there's always real estate firms or tax firms, personal injury attorneys. There's so many jobs out there. It's not that these jobs will pay well, but you can always get a job if you want to, and it's not impossible. And it often makes sense when there's just not a lot of other stuff out there, and you can do it. I know an attorney that lost a job as a trademark attorney, and in an economy where there was no work for trademark attorneys during an economic collapse. And that person had no problem getting jobs working at insurance defense firms. There's always jobs out there, and you can always get a job even when there's nothing, in different practice areas. So that's not a problem. And if you're cast out, meaning you're asked to leave, then it's not a big deal. You just need to go back and working with people who will have you until you get back to a point where you do have that business. And you may not get the same exposure to the same clients, and you may not be getting the same quality of work. But if you do well, you can always move up. So I don't really think that attorneys have to stay at the top law firms. You should use the experience you get in a top law firm and the training. I've seen countless, when I say countless, more attorneys than I can count, go to work in smaller firms and then move up to the big leagues later. I've seen attorneys come out of, I know one attorney that couldn't start his legal career for a long time because of he couldn't get a job. So he didn't even get a job until he was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years out of law school. And then he got a job in a small law firm and did well and moved up and moved up. And now he's at one of the top law firms in the world. It's just all this stuff. Your point is you need to keep going and you need to keep learning lessons at everything that happens to you. Never give up. Another thing you can do is you can take contract work. There's nothing wrong with doing contract work. You can make a good living as a contract attorney. I know one attorney that was a contract attorney that lived very frugally and retired when he was like, I don't know, 40 years old. And now is retired. So you can make a good living doing that if that's something you want to do. Many attorneys will start their own law firms. That's something you can do as well. And I've written an article about that you may enjoy. And many law firms, many attorneys do start their law firms have issues with it though, because a lot of times they'll do it because they don't have any business and then they don't learn anything about getting business. And so they start their own law firm without any business. And it doesn't make any sense. You need to learn how to get business first and or have a way of getting business if you start a law firm. And so that's something you should just think about before you do it. But I know lots of attorneys that have started businesses or started law firms and been very successful. But if you do start your own law firm, you need to make sure that you're going to have clients coming to you. And those mean people that you encounter in your legal career. And so you want those people, whether they're clients of the firm or whoever, you want them to like you, want them to trust you. Hopefully you want them to be dissatisfied with some aspects of the service or cost of the law firm. And I know that working for you is going to be cheaper. I'm not recommending you steal clients from your law firm, but I do recommend that you position yourself in a way that you think about what would you need to do to be competitive as an individual doing that work to get those type of clients. And the thing is if you have a niche and a business idea for your practice, and it could be all sorts of things, all it takes is one good idea. I've seen attorneys become fabulously rich with a good idea about a certain type of lawsuit to file or a certain type of client. So you just need to think about what would you do or what makes you unique and think that way and learn these skills. It's not too hard, but you can't just hang out a shingle and say, I'm going to be an attorney. You need to have a business proposition and having a law firm is very stressful. You have to get people to pay your bills. Very few attorneys that have their own practice will ever get paid the full amount they're owed by their clients because they don't have any negotiation leverage and people will fight back with them about the fees. It's very hard to get clients to come to you. So there's just lots of issues that you need to be ready for. No one cares if you're a brief writer, went to Cornell Law School. They have problems to be solved and they need problem solved. But if you're thinking about practicing law or quitting practicing law, I would recommend starting your own practice if you don't want to work in-house and that sort of thing. It can be a very good decision. And it's much better, I think, than quitting the practice of law, and which is the final option that a lot of people follow. The final option, of course, is to quit practicing law completely. And for many people, this is actually the right decision. Some attorneys simply shouldn't be practicing law. But many other attorneys that quit probably shouldn't be quitting, in my opinion. And if you're considering it, you really need to measure why you're thinking about it, because the first thing is the training you get as an attorney is awesome. There's really no shortage of attorneys that are very talented who stopped practicing law and now have like very good careers in politics, public relations, sales, business, and other pursuits. In fact, I would say that the odds of an attorney being more successful doing something else where there aren't people as smart as them and motivated as them doing it is actually probably better than practicing law in many cases. Attorneys do very well. And I think it's because being an attorney is just so demanding. They just can have much more illustrious and exciting careers than they would have ever had if they'd remained practicing law. And you can make a lot of money doing things other than practicing law. I mean, the sky's the limit. There's tons of, very famous actors, authors, artists, TV personalities, and others, law degrees, and people that do things in entertainment. There's people in business that do very well with law degrees. There's all sorts of people. If you really do want to practice law and that's where your motivation is, then you just need to get business. And your income as an attorney is going to be dependent on bringing business in, because whatever you do, even if you become a writer, you're still going to need to sell whatever you write. If you become whatever you do, if you start a business, you're going to still just need to sell whatever business service is. So quitting something because there's one component of it you're not doing well doesn't, in my experience, make a lot of success. I make a lot of sense. I would make a real college try, and meaning I would spend at least 3 to 5 years trying to get business before you quit by practicing law and figuring that out, because that's just one puzzle. And once you figure out that puzzle, you can really have a very good long-term career. And I don't think you need to stop practicing law. I think that a lot of the times the people that stop practicing law are the ones that are coming from the most prestigious firms where they have to get the most difficult clients. And that's like quitting. If you really enjoy tennis and you're a professional tennis player that's one of the top ranked tennis players in the world, and you no longer are the top ranked, that's like stopping playing tennis. If you enjoy tennis, you should always play. There's all sorts of things you can do. You could start a tennis school. You could coach tennis. You could start a tennis club. You could write books about tennis. There's just so many things you can do if you like something, as opposed to, or if you have skills, if you haven't developed one aspect of your skills. In closing here, I'm just going to close and then I will take questions. Building business is really one of the most important things you can do in the long term for your long-term survival as an attorney. And without business, you do have some options to choose from. If you're going to find work as an attorney, you're going to need to get access to work from somewhere. And without work, you really can't stay employed. You're going to need to find people to give you work. You're going to need to be in a firm that has work or a market that has work. Attorneys come to me and I see them daily. I see hundreds per week without business. And I just always try to be very clear about what they can do. And I usually tell attorneys to do what they can do to get work, but many of them don't. And instead, I'll market them to different markets around the country or the world if I need to. I've had attorneys without business that I've managed to get jobs for in the Middle East and in Europe and Asia and stuff. And it can happen. If you're willing to look at enough markets, you can always get a job. That's the point. And if in your late 60s or 70s, you're going to have a harder time. But I've even placed senior attorneys with no business in their 70s. It's just in different practice areas. It can happen. And the final thing is age can hold you back. Sometimes if you have health concerns, it can be hurtful to you. There is some ageism in the legal profession because as you get older, it's presumed that you have certain ways of doing things and you're not going to change. And if you burned a lot of bridges, that can hurt you as well. But in most cases, almost everyone that I work with or sticks with me gets a job. And the point is, though, is that, the most important thing for any attorney really is to get as much business as they can. And that's what you need to do. So what I'm going to do now is I know this is a little bit of a long presentation today, and I apologize for that. I just felt this message today was very important. I'm going to give everyone here maybe a 5-minute break. And then when I come back, and you don't need to take a 5-minute break. I'll probably take a couple minute break and come back. But if you want to take a 5-minute break, that's fine. But when I come back, I'm going to take, so right now it's 11:36 in Los Angeles. So when I come back, it'll be, I guess, 11:40. And I will take as many questions as anyone has. This is a very important topic, by the way. So anything you want to ask about it, please do. And it's something I'm very passionate about just because I see so many issues that people have with this. And I really do want you to have a good career. And I will tell you, the people that, if you sat through this presentation, you understood this and you take this stuff seriously, you're probably going to end up doing very well. But yeah, so we'll come back and it looks like 3 minutes now, and I'll take as many questions. So just any questions you have, I'll stick around as long as you guys do have questions for, and then I'll answer them. Thanks. All right, let's get started. Let's see. So it looks like I don't have a lot of questions today, which is actually okay. But if anybody does have questions and you ask them, I will answer them. But there's definitely not a lot of questions. And usually there's like a ton. I don't know why about this, but the first question is, let's see, and these are to all panelists. And you can, if you type the questions in the Q&A, then it's a little easier to answer, but I can certainly do them in the chat as well. The first question is, you've talked about the relative ease of finding attorney jobs in a better economy. You talked about New York and the Bay Area as being leading indicator. What is your assessment of the economy right now in terms of attorneys finding jobs? Are there differences by region? Yeah, so right now, I believe that at this particular point in time, and we're in this crisis of this pandemic, I believe that we're actually, as a placement firm, we're doing very well. We're getting lots of interviews and placements on every week. And one of the things that I'm seeing is that the markets that tend to be doing the best are smaller markets. So anything that's outside of large cities seems to be doing well. I don't know what's driving that. I'm assuming that the reason for that is because markets outside the large cities tend to get a lot of legal work when companies stop giving work to the largest firms in order to save money. That's the reason I've traditionally seen that. But also, I think a lot of people are also working remotely to some extent, and they may want to work in those smaller markets too. So I don't know, but a lot of people are getting laid off. A lot of people are losing their jobs. One thing that I have noticed about people that are losing their jobs is that unlike previous recessions where people were let go for economic reasons, law firms don't seem to care as much about that as they did anymore. I'm also noticing right now that practice areas that traditionally aren't very busy, especially for people in my position and placement, are doing very well. So some of those practice areas include like trust and estates is doing very well. Family law is doing exceptional. And up until maybe a year ago, we didn't really work on making family law placements. And I think just last week alone, we made 2 or 3 of them. And so certain practice areas are doing very well. I think markets like New York and San Francisco and a lot of the larger markets do seem to have really slowed down. I've noticed major slowdowns in New York, in San Francisco, and Chicago as well. And certain practice areas and the major markets seem to slow down. I think litigation has slowed down a lot on the major markets, especially. So that's some stuff that I've noticed. But people are getting jobs. They're getting jobs in smaller markets, and lots of people are. It actually almost seems like a boom time because we're getting so many interviews and so forth in smaller markets. I've never seen anything like it. And in addition to interviews in smaller markets, attorneys and practice areas you normally wouldn't consider getting interviews with are getting interviews. One of the things that I have noticed too is a lot of the major law firms, like the biggest law firms, while there's hiring going on in them, they do seem like they have slowed down in terms of their interviewing and hiring quite a bit. And I think the reason for that is I think that they have larger cost structures. So I think in terms of they have a lot of staff, they have very expensive offices, they have lots of overhead. And so I think that for them, they're being much more cautious about hiring than a lot of the smaller firms who may not have that. All this, by the way, is anecdotal. And so I'm not 100% convinced of that, but I do believe that most of the jobs right now are the opportunity is in smaller markets. And I'm encouraging everyone that I speak to do searches all over the country and to look at as many markets as you possibly can. Some markets are always going to be very difficult to get into without the bar. That would be like California is difficult to get a job in unless you have the bar. People get jobs there all the time. But that is a market that it is hard to get jobs in. But at the same time, weird things are happening. We replaced like a litigator in the Bay Area last week that didn't have great qualifications. It was from out of state. You just never know. So those are things that I would recommend, that would say. But I think you need to look at a lot of markets. That would be my advice. And then I think also one of the most important things you can do is to apply to a lot of places, even if they don't have openings. Because anytime a job's marketed, the law firm starts posting it publicly and so forth, it gets a lot of applicants and it becomes hard to get a job there. Okay, let's see. There are major slowdowns in the energy, drilling, and production industry in the southwestern U.S. How do you see this affecting hiring in major cities in the southern and southwest U.S.? Houston, Dallas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. Okay, in terms of Houston and Dallas, litigation seems to be doing fairly well there. Energy, as you are absolutely correct, has been doing not well there at all. So I think that market has slowed down. I do think that in the Oklahoma, New Mexico markets, I will say that I'm embarrassed to say that we do not as a placement firm, we do not work with a lot of attorneys in Oklahoma and New Mexico making placements there. But I have seen a lot of actually interest working with some litigators right now in Oklahoma, and they seem to be getting a lot of interest. So I think that's okay. Anytime there's a slowdown in energy, though, that does have a ripple effect. But one of the things I did say that I think is important to understand is anytime there's any type of slowdown in one industry, a lot of times other things will pick up. Litigation, when energy slows down, sometimes people will look for money, or they'll sue people. Or if energy companies are going out of business, and that could theoretically increase restructuring work and bankruptcy, or real estate refinancing type related work, or finance work for banking finances, loans are called in, and so forth. So that's how that plays itself out. But I agree, Houston and Dallas, in terms of the corporate market there, and definitely the energy work, seem to have been slowing down. Okay, if you guys have any more questions, I do have a couple questions in the chat. And then if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to ask them, because I'll answer questions as long as you guys like. But usually there's a lot of questions. Usually there's like over 20 questions. For some reason, you guys are slow today. I hope I didn't depress everyone with this talk, but there's a question here from someone that says, what do you do when you consistently bring in huge matters and the firm takes them all away? That's a good question. So I had that experience actually when I was at Dewey Ballantine. I was bringing in clients, and not great clients, but I was bringing in small businesses and so forth to do work. And every time I would bring in a client, you would have to have a partner that would do the work, that would be in charge of the work. And so they would actually get credit for it. So I was bringing in all these clients, and then the partner secretary that I was giving the work to started sending out these emails like, this is incredible, such and such brought in his third client in 2 weeks. And it was always my clients. Like, this guy didn't have any business. It was my clients I was bringing in. So she started sending out all these emails and stuff about how he was like such a superstar bringing all these clients. And so he was getting credit for it. So at the time, I thought it was funny, and I don't know why I wasn't mad about it. I was much less mature than I am now. But a lot of times law firms will work with clients. A lot of times law firms will talk to or work with what do you call it? They'll call people. They'll take credit for your work, and that's not something you want. Many times you have to become a partner until you become the person that's in charge of the matter. And law firms do that because they want the client, to receive a certain type of service. And so that's just kind of how that works. And they wanted a partner to be in charge of the work and have that sort of over. But if you start bringing a lot of business, the firm's going to notice, and a law firm's going to be insane to take it all away from you. So it's not something to worry about too much in the long run. And I wouldn't recommend I would just continue trying to bring in business, especially if you're the originator. If you're originating the work, the law firm's going to realize that you're doing a good job. Okay, so the next question is, let's see here. What does your process look like for working with candidates? Okay, and I appreciate people are asking more questions now. This is great. So now I have some more questions to ask, because these are all good questions. Okay, typically what I will do when someone comes to work with us is this is my personal process. I will talk to the person, or someone that works with me that will talk to them, or a recruiter will talk to them, and we will get an understanding of what the person is looking for. And then we'll try to draw out those strengths. So we'll find things about the person that they can't possibly say on their own, like things that make them look very strong, and make them look like just talk about them in a very positive way, make them likable, make them personable, make them so they can connect, make them so they're connectable, and all those sorts of things. And so that's one of the big things, is we try to draw that out. And then the recruiter or myself tries to form a personal relationship and bond with a person, which always isn't possible, but that's what we try to do. And we do the same thing with law firms. But once we do that, then we typically will, put together materials about the person that discuss them in a lot of detail and discuss their experience, and then do it in a way where we're emphasizing more stuff that's not on your resume than what's on your resume. So we try to talk about you personally, and then also why you would be a good fit for the firm, why you would likely stick around if the firms were hiring you, why you could be managed. And so and that's actually, if there's any secret to what I do, and the reason I make so many places than the recruiters do, and we're able to do it compared to what other people do, it's really making you likable to the firm. So we try to make you likable. And then we also try to make you look like you're going to stay wherever you go. So law firms are essentially asking, do we like the person when they're trying to interview and hire you? Can the person do the job? Which your resume pretty much tells a story, and all the work you've done in the past. Will the person do the job long term? Meaning, will they stick around, or are they likely to leave? And then the final question is, can we manage the person? A lot of people can't be managed. Some people, I had one candidate recently that was going into interviews. It wasn't my candidate, one of our recruiters did, and was telling all the law firms, like in the first interviews, that they expected a relocation bonus and all this stuff. And you want to make people believe that they're in control. And even if you're a partner, you need to make the law firm believe they're in control. The best partners, by the way, the ones that are the most successful, allow the law firm to have control. So you have to be manageable, even if you're a partner. Even politicians that don't look manageable by the public or are cast out of office. So being manageable is important. So that's one of the things we do. And then the next thing I do is we'll send the person job openings, and then we'll tell them all the openings, and then we'll tell them all of the, many times, the former openings that the firms had. And then we'll also give them prospects of firms that we believe are good in certain markets. So if you're in a larger market like New York City, typically you have to look mainly only at openings. If you're in smaller markets or you're relocating, like say you're working in New York, but you're actually from Omaha, Nebraska, you can probably apply to almost all the firms in Omaha if you're relocating home, because law firms aren't going to see people like you very often. It turns into more of there's just different rules for how you will expose people to firms and tell them about firms. But the most important thing is to really, in any search, to try to be over-inclusive of the places that you're looking at versus under-inclusive. I'll typically send people work on their files and send them a couple jobs every few days, or firms that I recommend them looking at. The firms that I work with that will prioritize are obviously the ones that have openings, and then ones that interview and hire people like them with their similar background from us most frequently, and then down from there. So the idea is that you want the person to be exposed to the market, and different people have different needs. So some people only want to look at openings because they have ideas about that. That's the only people that will hire you. And then other people, want to look at the whole market. And if you're a corporate attorney, you can't look at every firm in New York City or San Francisco or something. You have to look at firms primarily that have openings, but you can also there's some firms that are always hiring certain types of people. So it's an art and a science, and there's a lot of data that goes into it. There's also all sorts of lists and rankings we use, and a lot of them are developed by us. But every city has ranking list of the best firms for different practice areas. Then there's national rankings, and some rankings are better than others. Like Chambers is pretty good, but it's much better than US News. And then different cities have rankings, and Law Dragon, and there's tons and tons of rankings. And then we have rankings, and then we give firms points based on various things. So there's a lot of information that goes into finding the firms. Some firms will send people to the firms. Other firms will call them and check if they have an interest. Other firms will send blind feelers, which mean we'll tell them a little bit about the person. And then after we submit the person, if they allow us to submit them, if the firm wants to see them and the candidate wants to see the firm, if the firm may not respond, we have to follow up with the firm. If the firm does respond positively or doesn't respond and responds negatively, we'll follow up with them again. So there's just a lot that goes into it. And the whole thing is a science. I'm literally making changes to and hours of meetings per day. And I've been doing this for 20 years, about how, and it's fun. I like it, but that's in a brief, the process. And I know that's a lot of information. Different people do it different ways. Different recruiting firms, a lot of them are very small. We have over 150 people working here, and numerous programmers and data people and people that do things and research. And so we run a little bit differently than other places. Other places will just call people on the phone and tell them about one or two openings. It just depends. This is a placement firm, not a recruiting firm. So that's a lot of information, but okay, let's see here. Okay, at least 80% of open positions are not posted. Is that true? If so, how does one network during this uncertain time, especially when others in your network have lost jobs? So networking is a very effective way of getting jobs. There's no doubt about it, but there's also problems with networking. My advice of the best way to get jobs, when I started doing this whole process, I realized that more people would get jobs at firms that didn't have openings or didn't have posted openings, whether it was on their website or publicly, than would get jobs at firms with posted openings. And so my belief is that you're actually much better many times applying to firms that don't have openings. And I know that sounds crazy, and it's not something I think that a lot of people always want to hear. And I just want to show you an example, and I'll try to, I don't want to show anybody's information here, but yeah, I probably should be careful. I was going to show you our database, but the point is, the most firms law firms are businesses. And so they'll hire opportunistically. So it takes a lot of work to go out and to post a job and to review resumes and all that for a law firm, and then to bring in people for interviews. And so a lot of times if someone just applies to the firm and the firm sees the person's resume, they may be like, you know what, this person likes us. They wrote us, they took the initiative to write us. Maybe we should talk to them. And that actually works. And so that's the way to find jobs, in my opinion, is just by targeting people that do your practice area, that, and that sort of thing. If you do a certain type of practice area, like one of the classic ways things is like patent attorneys. So patent attorneys, on every market, there's probably 50 firms that do, any decent sized market, there's probably 50 firms that do patent law, even like in a market like Pittsburgh. So if you're a patent attorney in Pittsburgh, you should just apply to every firm that does patent work, and you will get lots of jobs. It's not that hard. But if you apply to the firms that have posted openings on whatever the website is, you may get one interview or two interviews. So it's just, you have to understand how to target firms by their practice areas and what they do and the size of their practice areas and so forth. And networking is an effective way, but why networking is not an application. When you network, the person you're networking with may have a vested interest in not bringing you on because they don't want to, there may be reasons that they don't want competition or they don't want this or that. So I believe that positions that aren't posted is extremely helpful and something that that works. It certainly just, to me, is a great idea. And I know that just as an example, and I hate to harp on this and spend so much time talking to this about people, but I believe it's just so important. I used to run a company and have a company called Legal Authority, which would send letters out to people, to law firms that had a matching practice area, the kind of work that person wanted to do. And I started the business in 2000. It took off and did great. Maybe it was 2001, I don't remember. But then I closed it down years ago because it just became I was sending letters and it was expensive, but it worked. And the way it worked basically is when you target every firm in your geographic area with a job, with a practice area of what you want to do, that they will hire you. People will hire you and bring you in. They will. So it's very easy. And it's much easier than when you're applying to jobs, because when you're applying to jobs, lots of people are going to apply to the same job. And the final thing is people would come to this service, this Legal Authority, and they would be from a fourth tier law school, who knows where, like outside of California. And they would apply to 300 firms to do entertainment law, and they would get 10 job offers. It's just ridiculous. Whereas you could be at Skadden Arps and wanting to be in entertainment law in Los Angeles and use a recruiter to, apply to 3 or 4 firms that do entertainment law and not get anything if you're not in entertainment law. So the point is, and of course, these were not, the same quality of firms, but the point is that when you apply to places that don't have openings, it's just, and these fourth tier law school people that wanted to be entertainment attorneys were law students. So I'm just telling you, it works. It's extremely effective. Now, recruiter's extremely effective as well, but if you're not using a good recruiter or a good legal placement person, you should apply everywhere you possibly can and you will get jobs. I don't know what to tell you. I've been preaching this my whole career because I've seen it work. And for whatever reason, most people don't do it. So just trust me, it's the best way to get a job if you really want to find something. Okay, how can an attorney learn how to start a solo or small or law firm practice, solo or small firm practice? Can you point me to the resources that might be available to help you with business plans, marketing, finance? Okay, that's a great question. So there's an article I wrote about 10 reasons why you should and shouldn't start your own solo practice. It's on the BCG site, and I would recommend reviewing that article. I think it's a helpful article, and I think it will give you a lot of the answers to your question. But the biggest thing in terms of if you really want to start your own solo law firm practice, you need to you should have a specialty. So that specialty can be trust and estates, which is a very good specialty, by the way, for solo people. It can be tax resolution, which is probably not as good. It can be family law, which is an exceptional one. People can do very well doing that, especially people from big litigation backgrounds. It can be any number of things. So you need to make sure that there's a big enough market for it. And there's a huge market for family law. There's a huge market for trust and estates. And you have to decide what kind of work you're interested in. Are you interested in transactional work? Are you interested in litigation related work? Whatever type of work you may be interested in, you should do whatever you can to try and get that type of work. That would be to start something around there. And then you should read up on what other people are doing. And then you should talk to other attorneys in other markets, not your own, that are doing that, and ask them what they like about it and don't. And then really get an understanding of what they're doing. One conversation with a right attorney could be worth more than months of study, because you could find something that's very interesting to you. So that would be what I would do. Now, as I talked about in the article, I actually did start a solo practice, or was working on it when I left, because that was one of the options that when I was leaving the practice of law that I thought about. And what I did is I ordered all sorts of kits and so forth from people that talked about how to start a law firm, right? How to start how to start a law firm in different practice areas. And then I read about their business plans. I got ads. I tried to learn about how people were generating business online, all those sorts of things. And you need to learn about that. I don't know what's popular now, what type of online advertising, but I'm sure there's all sorts of advertising that works. And so that's what you need to do. You need to become a student of it. You need to become interested in it. You need to become passionate about it. And you need to think, what type of work have you seen other people in your practice doing that looks interesting to you? And just ask those sorts of questions. And just go from there. And it really needs to be a question of introspection. You don't need a business plan. There's no such thing as a business plan, by the way. Business plans, because businesses change. I've never understood business plans. Like, business plans are basically saying, this is how the business is going to go. And a business plan, you're going to have to make up rules as you go. You may start out being a trust and estates transactional attorney and realize that most of your clients actually need trust and estates litigation and turn into a trust and estates litigator. Who knows? So you just need to be malleable, but you want to become a student in all this. And that would be my primary piece of advice. Okay. I was a big law lit associate, some big law as a litigation associate, and switched to a real estate boutique for less than a year and hated it. I want to get back to litigation at a big law firm and was able to get a district court clerkship. What are my chances of landing a big law litigation position out of my clerkship? What future potential clients care that my path looks abnormal in developing business, or will having some transactional work in my background help even a little bit? Yes, I think you're in good shape. I think a federal district court clerkship after having been a litigation associate in a big law firm, I think you will definitely be able to switch and go back. I don't think future potential clients are going to understand or care even that you did some real estate work. You weren't doing the transactional work for very long, and maybe you had an interest in it for some reason. It sounds you like litigation and like the writing and so forth. And if you're enjoying your clerkship and are willing to take that pay cut to do it, different people do different types of work. So some people are interested in doing transactional work. Other people are interested in, typically people that do transactional work like real estate and corporate and that sort of thing are people that were good at math and science in school, and people that are doing litigation are people that were good at reading and writing, history and English and that sort of thing in school. So it's just a different type of person, or political science, things like that. If you feel like you're in the right practice area right now, you'll have no problem generating business. I don't see why it would hurt you. And I also think the transactional work would help. I think a lot of times transactional people that come out of a transactional background and then go into litigation are exceptional litigators because they become very detail oriented, and they see details and things that other people that are just litigators a lot of times will just blow by. So I think it will help you. I've seen a lot of very good corporate attorneys become litigators and just be absolutely exceptional at it. I don't think that'll be difficult. I don't think you'll have too much trouble landing a litigation position in a good sized law firm. I don't think but I think it's also going to depend on the market. So I don't know if you're clerking in the same market that you're from, but I would apply to big firms in the market where you're clerking, as well as where you worked before, as well as where you're from, where you grew up. And I think you'll be fine. So I hope that answers your question. We have a couple more questions that are in the chat, and I'm going to answer those. But also, if you guys have any other questions, you can ask them. This is the fewest questions I've ever had, which is good. I hope everyone was sufficiently scared or something. I don't know. Let's see. Okay, here's another question that says, when you talk about matters that are too small for the firm, how do we get big fish? That's a difficult question. So a lot of times law firms will not allow you'll try to bring in clients, especially if you're at a major law firm, and the clients will be too small, and the law firms won't want you to work on them because they won't be profitable enough for them, or the clients won't lead anywhere. They'll just have kind of small matters and it won't really go anywhere. They'll be sensitive about the build. If the matters are too small, the idea is you just want to keep nurturing people, and the people that do the best in generating business will continually nurture people. The clients that they can't work with right now may become bigger clients later. They may have business later and so forth. And so those are all things that you need to be concerned about. And so you need to develop lots of relationships and be seen as a logical solution for people. If the law firm's not allowing you to bring in certain small work, the other option too is to go to a smaller law firm where you believe you can turn those small matters into the bigger matters. But ideally, you want to try to bring in bigger clients and do whatever you can and work on that. So that would be, and a lot of times people will make partner in a law firm and then start bringing in bigger matters. And you just have to get out there and hustle. You have to get out there and just meet people and then network with people and become part of groups. And there's lots of groups out there that do it. I wish I had the resources to start one in terms of the time. But there's things like Provisors, which is supposed to be pretty good for people. There's all sorts of professional networking groups. And the more of those you can get in, the better off you're going to be. And they're online too. So a lot of times you don't need to go anywhere, but you just need to meet people and you need to contribute something to them. And then hopefully that'll land bigger stuff. And one of the most successful business generators I know he goes out of his way to just find people that may need some advice about something. So he will look at lawsuits that are filed and send people a couple of tidbits about how he could help or something, or some words about an example of something he did to get something similar dismissed, or just things like that. That can be helpful. Okay, let's see. Following up on the big law associate question above, what if the clerkship is in the same is in the same market in Los Angeles, but is for a U.S. magistrate and not a district judge? Yeah, magistrate judges in the big market like LA is a prestigious clerkship. They're not as they're a little bit different in smaller markets, because in smaller markets it may not be as competitive to get a magistrate judge clerkship. A magistrate judge typically is not appointed, and it's like a job that they apply for, and it's not a job appointed for life. But still, a magistrate judge does give you a lot of valuable litigation skills, and especially if you're doing a lot of writing and stuff. And depending, a lot of magistrate judges do come out of very prestigious legal backgrounds. So that can also be helpful. It's very competitive to get a clerkship at a magistrate judge in a big market like Los Angeles. And it's not as competitive in smaller markets. So I don't see any reason why that would really stop you from going back to working in a large law firm. I did write an article about different types of clerkships on BCG Attorney Search, and I would recommend reviewing that. But hopefully that helps. But yeah, the magistrate clerkship, it still shows a lot of interest in the subject matter. But if I was doing a magistrate clerkship, I would just tell you what my advice would be. Right now, you have plenty of time. I would try to do, if it was a 1-year clerkship, the year after, I would try to clerk for a district judge or a circuit court judge. And I don't see why that wouldn't be possible if you're doing a good job. And it would just round out your experience. Because a lot of times magistrate judges will do like a lot of arraignments and discovery disputes and that sort of thing, and habeas corpus stuff. And then, so if it was me, I would try to do a district court clerkship to get some more trial experience and to watch that. And then just the ability to do different types of briefing. But that would be what I would recommend. And then the other benefit of clerking for a district judge or an appellate judge is they're appointed for life. The odds of you coming before them and you're as a big law attorney are better. Okay, this is the last question. Unless anybody has any, I will answer as many questions as people have. It looks like there's one. Yeah, that's it. So how can we build business during COVID? The typical events are out the window. So the best way to build business during any COVID or anything is to just be visible in the legal community. I remember years ago, I've told this story before, but I had this case about this very narrow legal issue, and I could only find one attorney that had written or done anything with it when I was looking for articles and so forth. And he'd only written like a 2-paragraph article or 3-paragraph article. It was very short, like maybe this long or this long. And so I contacted him and then met with him and tried to hire him, but then I don't know what happened. We couldn't come to terms on. But the point is that you need to be visible. And so being visible means you connect with GCs on LinkedIn, you send them articles that you think are interesting, you provide advice to people you think you can help, you figure out like how what you're doing applies to other people, and you just become creative and think about all sorts of marketing ideas. And that's how I would recommend doing all this stuff. And that's really the best way. Wow. So this has been a long webinar, guys. Thank you everyone for, let's see. Okay, here's another one. Yeah, and if you guys keep having questions, I'll keep answering them. I think you guys are great learners. I mean, this is awesome. Everyone's spending so much time here. Let's see. Are firms loosening up in terms of geographic location and remote working? For instance, how likely are firms to allow someone who lives in New Hampshire to get hired and work remotely in a big law firm in New York City? Most law firms in New York City are probably going to want the person to actually be in New York City, but that's just that particular market. I think they are loosening up on remote working. I know lots of people. I know one guy that moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, and is still working for a big firm in another city, and so people will work in other markets. You certainly can do that. What I would recommend is applying to a lot of different places in different markets. I think that they are loosening up to some extent. It depends on the practice area. I think that in being admitted to the bar, but yes, firms are loosening up a lot on that. And it is something that in all honesty, I see maybe going on for quite a while. I don't see anything changing, but law firms do like people in the office. And even in the midst of this pandemic, lots of people are going in the office. All right, man. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. And again, I do this every week. So I will, if you have any other questions, I'll be here next week. And this, topic today was a very important one. I hope you absorb the lessons from here and it helps you. And I've done a lot of these webinars in the past. And if you ever want to review them or get a list of them, they're on oar.com, which is oar.com, and you can get them there. So thank you. Bye-bye.